Welcome to this session of the Intuitive Medicine Summit, where we will explore ways to participate in our own healing with my guest, Lisa Bonnice. Our topic today is shape-shifting, intuition, and weight balancing. Lisa Bonnice is an award-winning author, former stand-up comedian, and program host with the Shift Network. Her first book, Shape-Shifting, The Body, Mind, Spirit, Weight Solution, includes a foreword by Neil Donald Walsh, and her newest novel, a metaphysical comedy called The Puppet Master, is available wherever books are sold. Lisa, thank you for joining us and welcome to the session.
Thank you, Nadirah. I'm so looking forward to our conversation because we always have a blast when we get together. So I'm looking forward.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can capture that in this conversation, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to share today as well. So I understand that you lost 50 pounds while researching and writing Shapeshifting, but that you don't recommend a specific diet. Can you say some of what you did in order to lose the weight?
Yeah. When I wrote Shapeshifting, it was about 20 years ago, and I was just beginning my exploration of alternative health and wellness, like Reiki and soul retrieval and past life regression, all that really interesting stuff. But I was also really struggling with my weight at the time. I was at an all-time high, and I simply refused to buy yet another size up. That was as big as I was going to let myself get, but my clothes weren't fitting, so you got to do something. So I started out with the standard eat less, exercise more model because, that's what we're all taught to do. But because at the time I was really deeply immersed in learning all these new metaphysical tricks that I was learning. So I applied that to myself and my process. And I learned that for me, it's different for everybody, but for me, it wasn't as much about which diet or exercise program I was devoting myself to, especially because I had physical issues that made exercising really difficult. So I learned that it truly was about self-care and listening to my body, using my intuition about why I couldn't lose the weight with those two supposedly simple tools, eat less, exercise more. Easy chemistry, physics, etc. But it wasn't working for me. So instead, I dove into the reasons that I was out of balance to begin with. And the primary reason I discovered at that time was that I wasn't putting myself first. I wasn't taking care of myself. And, this is really sort of a no-brainer, isn't it? Now we all know this, but back then I was much younger and I didn't know how to put my needs first, to put my oxygen mask on before helping others. And another thing was that I needed to eat healthier, not less. It wasn't about the calories as much as about eating processed foods and foods that my body didn't do well with. So at the time, I was using Dr. Elson Haas's false fat diet because that's what I needed at that time. It worked wonderfully, but there's a lot more to this than just changing your diet. I also at the time was terribly sick. I was suffering from debilitating vertigo. I was literally out of balance. So I wasn't burning a lot of calories, eat less, exercise more wasn't the answer for me. So just taking care of myself, listening to my body's needs, using these tools that I was learning, and of course, tweaking my physical regimen was what I needed to do. It's very individualized. One size does not fit all.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And actually, the part where you talk about learning more about self-care, that feels very intriguing to me and very interesting. And also where you say that you needed to learn how to use your own intuition. Can you say a little bit more about both of those, especially how we can apply our intuition to take better care of ourselves and our bodies?
Yeah. Again, it was more about figuring out, well, I was asking myself, what's wrong with me? Why can't I lose weight? And I was really sort of attacking myself for not being able to succeed at something everybody else seemed to have no problem with. Although in reality, everybody else was, if you watch TV, you're seeing diet pills, you're seeing people pounding themselves at the gym. This is not an easy process. It's not like anybody was just tra la la losing weight. But the way that I was seeing it, there's something wrong with me. So I had to look in to, again, I mentioned that I had vertigo. So I really focused a lot on, why am I so out of balance? Why does just getting up off the couch send me into a tailspin? So I tried very hard to work on finding my balance, finding my center. And I developed, these little brain tricks where I pretended I had, I don't know if you remember these, they're little toys. It's like a disc with it's a cardboard bottom with a plastic top. And there's these little balls and there's little holes you're supposed to, do this with. And I pretended that my brain was one of those, and the center of my brain was the hole. And I just would, focus on bringing that little ball into the center of my mind. And even though this was just a goofy little trick to me, it really helped me to learn, okay, this is what I need to do to stay balanced. And even though I struggled with the vertigo for many years, that was just one of the little personal tricks that I was able to develop for myself.
Yeah. I notice in myself that I get very excited when I hear about someone going on a journey like you're describing, and then the ways that life brings all of these little messages back to you. So you're like, oh, I'm going to be more intuitive and more in touch with my body and more aware of myself. And then you find out that you are not only physically out of balance, but also that you are feeling very literally out of balance too. That's fascinating. Can you say a little bit more about why you called your book Shape Shifting, or why you call this process shape shifting?
Yeah, actually, I think all of us who are digging into the human potential and spirituality and all the lovely things that shift, we all know that we aren't just a physical body, that, within this physical form, there's a light body which holds our healthiest imprint. It's in there. It's just buried under all this gunk, this the physically hardened thoughts and impressions that came from other people or from past life crap or ancestral trauma, that type of thing. So there's all this stuff that isn't really us. Inside us there is our healthiest self. So what I call shape shifting is tuning into that imprint deliberately connecting with it as often as possible and asking it to change my physical form from the inside out. I tune in, I can do it right now and I can feel right now, wow, this feels amazing. And then I ask it to ripple outward into my energy field and create change from the inside out. And I've learned that when I do this, not only do my body's conditions improve, I also find myself synchronistically drawn to helpful information that can actually help me solve problems. Like, what's causing this? What's blocking me?
Ah, now I want you to go all the way into that information. It sounds a lot like what I've experienced when I've been on meditation retreats, and I've like at through the process of going through my body, I've felt places where I was holding like wounds or physical experiences that I've had, emotional experiences, and things like that. And that
Mhm.
clearing that out allows you to move in the world in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as we know, intuition is about sensing into the energy of a situation itself. So the more that I used my intuition, I was able to sense, the healthy me that I mentioned that was buried beneath all the turmoil that had become excess physical weight. And the lack of being able to exercise was the true challenge. And that was the thing that I really had to dive into, because for me, changing my diet, eating healthier, eating cleaner, that really was the easy part. I mean, it's not easy to turn away chocolate cake, but it wasn't the diet part that was hard for me. It was figuring out what was keeping me from really embracing this. What's with the illness? So again, I gained COVID weight just like everybody else. So I restarted this process trying to figure out, all right, what's blocking me? And so I started this again. I have this journal format that I use. And so I started again listening to my body's signals. And let me give you an example. this time, the COVID weight, this has been a real struggle getting it to drop off. I mean, I had a hard time with this. And I even asked my doctor to help me with it. And I told her that no matter how badly I wanted to fit into my clothes, because that was the main issue, I had nothing that fit me anymore. And I wasn't concerned about a bikini body because I never really wanted one of those anyway. But that's another story. I just didn't want to buy a new wardrobe. I needed help getting started. I was stuck. I couldn't make myself even care enough about this to even make the effort. I really needed help. I was asking for help. Please help me with this. And her response was like a gut punch. She said, without really paying attention to what I had just said, my struggle was, she says, yeah, there's a lot of good food out there. And that's not what I said. I know eat less, exercise more. I've done the diets. I've restricted my food intake so many times. I know the drill. My question was, why can't I make myself care enough to bother eating healthier, to do any of this? And, COVID lockdown is sort of forcing us all to do a lot of self-examination. So as usual, I do it myself. I dug up my shape-shifting journaling format that I created for myself all these years ago and started logging again. And through the process of exploration and following my intuition, tracking my dreams, I synchronistically came across some life-changing information that a seemingly unrelated issue I was having with my liver can actually cause weight loss resistance. So sometimes it is physical. Sometimes it's not just, the metaphysical stuff. But what I noticed in one of my dreams that I logged in my journal included making homemade lemonade. A totally off the wall dream, seemingly unconnected to anything. But that same day, I discovered that lemon juice in warm water, which I have right here, it'll help detox the liver. So now, in addition to eating cleaner and getting as much healthy exercise as my body allows, I'm working on an actual cause of the problem, which my regular doctors knew I was struggling with. They knew that I have this thing going on with my liver, and they're not offering any suggestions, but they never said that it could cause weight loss resistance. I had to learn that elsewhere by following a trail of breadcrumbs that my inner self was leaving to guide me.
I love that. I love it. Um, because I also feel like there's a thing that you're showing, there's a direction that you're taking us in that is very different from diet culture. And as you're saying, like eat less, move your body more, which is not accessible to everyone, nor is it beneficial to everyone. But it sounds like what you're talking about is a process of getting more in tune with your physical self, getting more in tune with your spiritual and emotional self, and then bringing those into a place of harmony and connection.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there's two directions that I really want to go, and we've got some time, so I'm hoping we can cover both of them. One, I would love it if you can share more about your journaling process, if you're able to do that, and then maybe we can start there and then see where we go from there.
Okay, cool. Actually, the journal process came about as a result of after I wrote Shapeshifting, people would send me emails saying, "Fun book, but what did you do specifically?" Because I guess during the process I sort of assumed that it was coming through in the book what exactly I did. So I came up with this journaling format, and I published the Shapeshifters Daily Diary. But let me go ahead and share my screen here so you can see. And we start out with you don't have to do every single one of these, but I find that if you do follow this format, it's very, very helpful. Every day I log, even if it's just a couple sentences. When you acknowledge the good things, you expand them, then you make them grow. So you always start out with your triumphs. What are some good things? Even sometimes my triumph is just, I remembered to log today. Because for me, remembering to do this is the hardest part. Staying focused and not getting distracted by the crap that made me, get off balance to begin with. So sometimes the triumph really is just, I sat down and I typed out my notes today. Other times it's, hey, I lost a pound overnight, or I found some yummy new foods that I really like and are healthy for me. And makeovers, they can be similar, but every day you should do something. that makes you look or feel better about yourself, even if it's just taking a full-blown shower and doing the pedicure and all these kinds of things, little things like that, saging your house, anything that you can do to show that you're doing something for yourself. You've made yourself feel a little better. Buy yourself a pair of earrings. Go ahead and have a chocolate cookie, whatever it is, something that makes you feel like you're taking care of yourself. And then the challenges, these are things that are in the way. Just like the word says, challenges are things that are currently vexing you. But then what you do with the challenges is you flip it into an intention. If you say something like, I cannot, I can't make myself even care that that I haven't lost a pound or two, and then the intention is, I intend that I not only move downwards on the scale, but that I am gentle with myself. It could even be, I intend that I do more makeovers for myself. Whatever your challenges are, you find a way to make them into a positive action. Your current conditions are, sometimes you need to sort of explain to yourself, you know what, I need to cut myself a break. These challenges are here because something's happening in my life that I don't have any control over. So at least you're acknowledging, I'm not to blame for all of this. Or you might be feeling great, and it's good to log that too. And dreams, as I mentioned, just these little things that you might not realize are little clues. They can come up in dreams. And I know a lot of people don't remember their dreams. I even have that problem a lot. But what I did was I bought a little dream journal. I keep it on my nightstand. But I also bought a little pen with a light on it. So when you click the pen, there's a light that it's blue light, so it won't wake up my husband. It doesn't light up the whole room. And I can just wake up enough, scribble some notes, and then go back to sleep. And it's been an amazing tool. Daily Thanksgiving, we all know the power of gratitude, just showering gratitude. And sometimes it really is a struggle to come up with something to be thankful for. But if you've got this in your journal, it forces you. I have to come up with something I'm thankful for, damn it. So, so that to me is one of the most important things. And then epiphanies are just, these are when you get these aha moments of, oh my God, I just realized this whole thing is because of, my mother's words. I'm hearing her in my head because she struggled with her weight, and I didn't want to be like my mother, but I see that I am. So the epiphanies are ways that you sort of celebrate that you've discovered something exciting, and that can go into your next day's triumph. And every day, again, if you can remember to do this, it's so powerful. It's amazingly powerful. I rely on this.
I actually, as I'm watching you go through and describe the steps in the process, it makes me think too of that it can be used not just for shape shifting for weight loss, but for
Yes.
other processes. It makes me think of my own journey of weightlifting and re-establishing my relationship to my body and my connection to my body. Would you say that this is something that would work for everyone the way that it's worked for you?
I would say yes, and you make a really excellent point that this is not just about losing weight. And let me address that for a second. I'm always so, I hate talking about this like it's weight loss, because in so many ways it's become so shallow, and it's become such a hackneyed premise that I'm almost sometimes embarrassed that I wrote a weight loss book, because it just sounds so anyway. That's my own personal issues. But yes, this process can be used for any life change that you want to do. You don't even have to work on your weight at all. Maybe you just want to accomplish something in your career, or you want to accomplish, you want to move to a new house. This format, it's basic, solid metaphysical principles. So whatever goal you're working toward, this is absolutely powerful. I've used it over the years for a lot of different things.
I'm getting like when I get excited and it feels like, oh, we're going down a path and we're heading someplace, and this is connecting to something inside of me. And the idea that people can reestablish a loving intuitive connection to their bodies, which are carrying them through their lives, that you manage to heal yourself through this process, and that in the process as well, you're able to get back into your clothes, which was a desire and a goal that you had. Can you share a little bit more about some of the obstacles that you encountered? I know you've touched on a few of them, but can you speak about them more deeply as you were going through this experience?
Sure, absolutely, because really that's the crux of the issue, is discovering the obstacles. Because a lot of times if you're not paying attention, it's just, that's just the way it is. That's how my mind works. That's how my family is, blah, blah, blah. You don't really look at, okay, what are the details here? So as I mentioned before, my biggest challenge, honest to goddess, was that I have to keep reminding myself that I have this power within me to do this. It's there. It's always there, whether I pay attention to it or not. And it's creating whether I'm paying attention to it or not. So whatever it is that I'm thinking about and griping about and worrying about, that's being spun out into my physical world, because this is just a generating machine. It churns out what I ask it to. So I have to remember that. Again, the hardest thing for me, the biggest challenge for me, life gets in the way. It beats you down. I need to be constantly reminded. And that's why this journaling format is so important. But another obstacle to the idea, again, I mentioned that the term weight loss, it's generally connected with, bikini body expectations. And I never wanted to deliberately invite the male gaze, as it were. And I know that keeps me from getting down to a much lower weight that I carried, when I was a teenager, a young woman. So that's why I prefer to call this weight balancing, because I want to be healthy and balanced, not get stared at and drooled over. But here's a more recent example. As I mentioned, when I recently decided to lose the excess COVID weight, I I this is hard to talk about, but you'll see why in a second. I was moving along. I was making great progress, and I was making notes about what I wanted to talk about for this session. I knew this was coming up, and I knew that I wanted to talk about, because this is the Intuitive Medicine Summit, and I wanted to talk about intuition and weight balancing. So I was doing very specific logging, and before long, even though I was making some progress, I was losing some weight. I was like, "Yay, this really does work!" Before long, even though I noticed I was doing everything right, my weight stalled, and it would not budge for a couple weeks. It was stuck, and I was getting pissed. So I started doing some inner exploration, some intuitive listening, and I finally realized that it was fear of embarrassment or ridicule for what I have to say here today, because I've faced it so often in the past. And this is a pretty public forum. I'm taking a risk talking about something so very personal to a lot of strangers. And as I mentioned, I've always been sort of embarrassed to have written a weight loss book. And even after it was published, again, at the turn of the century, this was a long time ago, I had lost 50 pounds while writing this. That's a huge accomplishment. And some people actually said this to me. They said, well, if you're going to promote a weight loss book, you better lose some weight. Because I wasn't
You
pencil thin.
serious?
They said I lost 50 pounds. I was at a healthy weight. It was in the proper BMI range, but it still wasn't thin enough for them and their expectations of what the term weight loss means.
Yeah.
Plus, when I look back at the book, as I mentioned, I wrote it the turn of the century. It was so long ago. And now I see, it was pretty basic. It was my very first book. And, some of the humor is sort of sophomoric. And so I'm kind of embarrassed by, it was my first writer's effort. And I was dreading people hearing me today and reading the book and thinking less of me because it's my writer's first attempt. So because of that fear, I literally stopped losing weight. And as soon as I realized this, I decided to just cancel this interview. You know what? I don't have to do this. I'm not going to torture myself. I let it go. And then as soon as I decided to do that, the weight loss started back up immediately. The next day I was down a pound. So, obviously I've chosen to go ahead with this. So to use stage fright.
So then that makes me think about, okay, the obstacles, understanding and recognizing and realizing the obstacles, that's a major hurdle that
Mhm.
you literally that you need to address. But then this thing that the direction that you started to talk about and that you touched on too is about the need to be gentle with yourself and to be patient with yourself. How how do you keep coming back to that, um, when if we live in such a society that's just so like hard on us and we need to be hard on ourselves in order to make it through? How do we keep coming back to that space of like kindness and gentleness with ourselves?
Yeah, it truly is a struggle, especially if you're a human being, because we've all got that inner voice, we've all got that chatter, that stuff that we've been taught, and that's the crux of the issue. And sometimes our stuff doesn't want us to examine it. I mean, if I can mention Paul Levy and his the Wetiko mind virus is that you know about, and he's in this summit, so people can reference his interview, but there's an energetic force that doesn't want us to succeed. It doesn't want us to do this self-examination. It doesn't want us to feel good. So if we can remember, again, there's this thing inside of us, this powerful thing that can express itself if we just ask it to. And again, the remembering, that's the hardest part. Remember, remember, remember. So put things up around your house. I mean, make yourself an altar. I've got a candle burning over here. Just do whatever you can. That's where the makeovers come in handy. I used to make wire wrapped crystal jewelry, so I would find a new beautiful crystal that I just loved, and I would sort of charge it with, remember how much you are loved, and remember this, remember, and then I would make a pendant out of it, and I would wear that. And if you're not making jewelry, do the same and just carry it around in your pocket with you. Just find little ways to remember, to remind yourself this is the truth of who you are. You are not all of that. Again, that's the biggest challenge. And I think that's why so many people struggle with keeping their weight in balance, because we all deal with this garbage. We all deal with this crap.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we continue any further, I do want to make sure that I take a moment to mention your website, which is lisabonnice.com. And so, does that mean, even though you said you were wary of people seeing this interview and then going and looking for your book, can they go and find your book and your other books there?
Yeah, they can indeed. They're all of my books are available on Amazon.com as well. My website is just sort of a gathering place for all the stuff that I do. I've got a blog that I update now and then. I've even got a couple of recordings of my doing stand-up comedy from the old days. Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff that you can find there. It's a very eclectic mix of who I am and what I do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And so now I would like to ask you about if or how there are ways that humor contributed to your journey, and maybe not so much, but I'm very curious. I find for myself that when there's something that I'm struggling with, if I can find a way to laugh at it, it doesn't diminish it. Sometimes it does lead me to an opening that I wasn't aware of before. And so I'm wondering what possible ways you might have seen the same thing happening with you for this book and for the weight balancing process of shape shifting.
I really like that question. I think the thing I love about humor is that, the obvious, it helps you take things less seriously. I mean, that's what it's about, obviously. But but when you take things less seriously, if you can find the humor in it, I mean, the process of writing a joke is to find a premise and look at it from a completely different angle and mention this different perspective, this different way of looking at it. And oftentimes, I mean, what makes a good joke is that this tickles you, that, oh my God, that I see it completely differently now. So yeah, humor to me really it does help. It diffuses painful situations. There's no doubt about that. I mean, these days, things have changed. Obviously, we're becoming more woke and more politically aware and more, hopefully more compassionate about the suffering of others. So, comedy can be difficult now. It can be that's actually one of the reasons I didn't do stand up I quit after like 7 years, because I was having a hard time um, writing jokes that weren't based in cruelty, because really a lot of humor is poking fun at something, or just derogating and saying mean things. And so that was one of the reasons I stopped doing stand up, because it was hard for me to stand up on stage and say these kind of nasty things. And I'm not saying that other people can't do it. There are some people who are just brilliant at kind-hearted comedy. It just wasn't in my makeup at that time. So sometimes humor can be cruel, but other times it can be so uplifting. I mean, I'm forgetting the name of this very famous person who used laughter therapy to help recover from cancer. That laughing really does, seeing the humor in something really does bring healing. That's a
Yeah.
very long answer to a fairly
No,
short
I loved
question.
it. I loved it because it's a thing that I find fascinating, and it feels as though, in the same way that what we're discussing here, um, delving into it reveals aspects of ourselves, and in the same way, humor can do that as well. It can reveal and illuminate a lot, but it can also show some things about ourselves that we might not be so comfortable with. It feels as though what you're talking about, is really another pathway that takes us into the core of ourselves, of what it means to be a person in a body, moving through the world, and that there are some universal principles that you're inviting people to make use of and then apply to their own lives in ways that work for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, weight loss is just sort of an excuse. It's what brought me into this kind of self-exploration. I was, when I was writing this book and seeing these results, I was actually sort of grateful that, you know what, if I had not gained all this, 50 pounds overweight, I'm a fairly small person, so 50 pounds on me, I was pretty big. And so by my body, I felt like my body was, betraying me and tricking me. And I hated my body for it. I was so angry at my body. Uh, but again, as I really dove in and I practiced these metaphysical principles, what better way to learn alchemy? What better way to learn about our own magical abilities, about our own powers of creation from the inside out? Not everybody needs to do this, obviously, but this was my dharma. This was something that I personally needed to learn, to work on. And it's how I know when I gain extra weight, because I mean, I've lost this weight, and for the most part it stayed down, but I go up and down a little bit. But I know now that when it goes up, that's my barometer. Hey, pay attention, pay attention, you're not taking good care of yourself. Maybe you should stop eating all the crap. Maybe you should move around a little more. Maybe you should stop and think about what are the thoughts you're brewing in your head that are keeping you from taking care of yourself. So yeah, weight loss is just one reason to do transformational work.
Yeah. I like that. I like that image of each of us as the alchemist and as the gold at the same time. I really love that. Something that this conversation is making me think about, Lisa, you mentioned people commenting on your weight after you had written this book and put yourself out there in a pretty vulnerable kind of way. um, is the increasing awareness that we are coming to that women's bodies do not belong to the public sphere, that our perfect balanced space is for us to determine and not for someone else. Can you speak on that a little bit?
I would love to. Thank you. Because this has really been one of my biggest pet peeves. I mean, what I was born in the '60s. Yes, I'm showing my age, which is another thing that there's this age shaming. Oh my God, you're old. But back then, to be in a female body meant to sort of, it was just a given that, well, you're on display, you're supposed to be pretty, you're supposed to be, this toy for men to stare at. And I've always just, it made me cringe so much that just, oh, don't look at me like that. That I learned eventually that that was one of the reasons I was putting on, I wasn't packing on pounds, but I was putting on enough to where I wasn't like, oh, Playboy bunny type body. Even though, my body does have that potential to look like that, I wouldn't allow myself to because it just felt so creepy. And
Mm,
for so many years, that's just how it was. And there was nothing we could do about it. And I am so, I have mixed feelings. On one hand, I'm so jealous of this generation where of these young women who are claiming their power. So on one hand, I'm like, why couldn't I have had that? But on the other hand, I'm so glad. Yes, go girls. Yes, claim this because it's just so wrong and it's done so much damage, not just to women, but to men. And because, their expectations, they've been taught this is what's beautiful, etc. And I mean, if you look at the research, you see that a lot of women who've either been, sexually assaulted, raped, whatever, it's really common for women to become really, really heavy because they don't want to look sexually attractive. I know a young woman who was sexually assaulted and she stopped eating. She
mm,
became anorexic and stopped having periods because she didn't want to be in a female body anymore. So
yeah,
being in a female form can be so difficult, and exploring it is, it is such a challenge because we're at a transition time where what it means to be female is completely different from what it used to be. And I know a lot of older women are trying to catch up with, well, what does that mean? And younger women are like, what are you talking about, old lady? That's not how it is anymore. So I love that we're at this transition phase where women are regaining their power. Where the pendulum is swinging. Sometimes it goes too far. Sometimes it doesn't go far enough. But
yeah.
the fact that the feminine principle is starting to become more balanced with the masculine is, I think, one of the most amazing things that I've experienced, being alive at this time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I love that this sense again of this reconnection to our bodies and reconnection to our spirits, it gives us permission to really claim our power
Mhm.
as the owners and possessors of these bodies that we're moving through the world wearing.
Right, right. And just
Right.
because it's a female version doesn't mean that we're sex toys.
Yeah.
And I mean, even saying that, just saying that out loud, again, brings up the voices of, the male influences of my childhood, my upbringing of, oh, shut up. There's
Yeah.
all this training, all this programming that we get that we really don't pay attention to unless we're paying attention to it. And it's
Mhm.
so important to just listen to your intuition. Is that
Yeah.
true? Is that true? No, it's not.
Yes. And the ways that we can go through life. I'm thinking about my own experiences of going through life very armored, which protected me and was effective in a lot of ways. But it also meant that I spent a lot of time shut down and disconnected from myself. And so a lot of my journey has been about coming back to this place of softness and
Mhm.
suppleness and gentleness and kindness with myself, that I don't need to have spikes out all the time, you know? And it feels like this is a good practice for that as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love the way that you put that, the allowing yourself to be what are considered to be feminine traits, soft, nurturing, gentle, and just
Mhm.
allowing that to be
Yeah.
without the guard being up. That's beautiful. It's a true challenge for some of us, but it's what we can strive for.
Yeah. Let's see. So I think we're coming in the direction of the end of our time. And so I wanted to know, is there any aspect of this that you feel that we haven't covered that you really want to make sure that participants receive or that they are able to connect with in this interview?
Uh, yes and no. There's a part of me that really wants to say this out loud, and there's another part of me that's saying, shut up. And that part of me that's saying, shut up, it's my mother's voice. And I don't mean like I'm hearing voices. I mean, it's, the training, don't tell secrets. Do you keep this to yourself? You shut up. But that voice, that training is part of what's caused my problem, for lack of a better word, my issue, my challenge, my stumbling block, my obstacle is this, that my mother had. I wouldn't say she had an eating disorder. She wasn't anorexic or bulimic, but she was heavy as a teenager, and she spent her entire life really struggling her weight. And back in the '60s, she was on diet pills. I mean, like the prescription, the Valley of the Dolls kind of diet pills that all the women were on. Everybody was pencil thin in the '60s because they were all on speed. And so, she spent her entire life really struggling with her weight. And she was always able to stay very thin, but she always said horrible things to me and my daughters because those were the things she was saying to herself. Oh
Yeah.
my God, those pants make you look fat. Oh my God. Blah, blah, blah. And so that's that voice that's inside my head. That's the one that is trying to shut me up to not talk about this. And again, that's where the Wetiko thing comes in, where shut up, don't look at it, don't talk about it. But my advice is look at it, talk about it. It's in there and it can be removed. It's not the real you. It's not that beautiful light body that's within you that is waiting to be rippled outward. And I think that that's probably some good closing words.
Those are amazing closing words. And I love the invitation that as we're healing ourselves, we're also healing mother lines and we're sending the healing down to our descendants as well. That's a beautiful way to conclude. So thank you very much, Lisa Bonnice. Thank you to everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation in the Intuitive Medicine Summit.